of a hiatus here on Commentator's Corner, but I have got a fellow man behind the microphone alongside me to my immediate left-hand side. When elocution, when it comes to introductions for commentary streams for iRacing or any sim racing you can think of, this man is up there with the very best of them. Welcoming along to episode 64, Jake Sparey. Jake, buddy, we've known each other for quite a few years now. How are things?
Things are good, mate. Things are good. It's been a long, long journey to get to this point, but I have to say I'm really excited to be here and really excited to have this ability just to chat about what's going on, basically, because it's there's been a lot and there's also been a little, and it's kind of like let's just throw it in the air and see how far along I am and how far I need to go.
That's always the best optimistic way to be there, Jake. But in your own time, please introduce yourself to everyone that is currently an audience member of Commentator's Corner.
Well, hello there, Commentators Corner. My name's Jake Sparey. I've been a sim racing commentator for, I think, a decade now. So that's been super duper cool. I predominantly do most of my work on iRacing. So you may have heard of me on iRacing's YouTube channel, RaceSpot TV, GSRC, so Global Sim Racing Channel, SimSpeed TV. I've done a few things here, there, and everywhere. I'm working on a few other side projects as well. So I dabble. It's the best way to put it. I dabble.
Yeah. And, well, we first came across each other back in the old World Pro Racing days with the likes of Justin Mifsud and the team over in Malta, and had the opportunity to work alongside each other. And finally, we got to meet face to face at the loudspeaker party earlier on this year at the Curve Club. But Jake, you've been involved in sim racing commentary for longer than I have. You actually, if I remember correctly, you were one of the British. You were with Race Spot at the time when they were helping the coverage with the Sim Racing Expo at the Nurburgring. I think, if I remember, back in 2018. Now, let's talk about the Sim Racing Expo, because this year, 10th anniversary, biggest expo ever. I think we hit our biggest amount of views on the Saturday. No, on the first day on the Friday, 20
Yeah.
plus thousand views. In your honest opinion, it's really good to see that the expo is going from strength to strength, from what it was starting back in September of 2014 with 11 exhibitors, and 84 was what we had this year at the Dortmund Messe. How impressed are you by the scale of growth that the expo has achieved?
I think that the scale of growth that Sim Racing Expo has had is linked exponentially to the boom that sim racing has had in its popularity. I remember a time when I was scrolling along one of the very old FSR forums just to see sort of how former champions sort of went along and race wins. I stumbled across F1 Career Challenge 99 to 02, and the very first true origin of Gregor Hutu as this incredible sim racing driver
Mm.
who took 4 straight wins. I think he took Australia, Malaysia, Monaco, and Great Britain, and then didn't race for the rest of the season. And so when you look at that very early days and you look at what early sim racing was and how you sort of link that forward, um, I think the growth has been simply phenomenal. You look at things like Jan Mardenborough, for example, and Gran Turismo, and what he was able to produce in that movie that came out a couple years ago that I still need to go and see. It is incredible in terms of the story of effectively the rags to riches style of what's going on. You're looking now at drivers like Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. Um, Lando Norris, I've commentated on the Lando Norris race before he ever made Formula One. You're looking at Max Verstappen. There was a Porsche race that he did at Daytona, which was, I think, a Porsche Esports Super Cup qualifier, where he won at Daytona by a thousandth of a second. So you're seeing all these great drivers are now starting to really embrace sim racing, where I think that it was as a training tool, it was a toy, has gone along now and has become this absolutely wonderful scene where you're looking at it, Williams are dominant at the moment. Team Redline are effectively the Ferrari in terms of legacy and history of sim racing. Coanda's absolutely fantastic. You've got all this wonderful F1 esports scene that's sort of flourishing, getting into play. And it all comes back to what I believe is the home of sim racing, which is Sim Racing Expo, because the pure heart of this sport that we've got, this esport that we've got to be able to say, what is our hub and what is our
Mm.
home? And now you can split that many different ways. You can say, oh, it's the FIA Motorsports game, so you're going to jump in on it. You can say it's F1 esports, that's the pinnacle of it. But ultimately, when you talk about for the sim racers, to the sim racers, even from when I went to the Nürburgring in 2018 and was with a fantastic crew of Will Vincent, Connery Maddock, and Scott Fountain. I think that from there to Dortmund is a massive jump. And I tell you what, it'll be another level again when they go to South by Southwest and make that next stage of breaking into America with
Mm.
a wonderful Sim Expo. So when you sit down and you look at it, sim racing has come leaps and bounds from even when I started. And I looked at the price pool and we went, well, $10,000 is huge out there. And now you're talking like, okay, you've got the top echelon, the top 1% are making this now a career that they can sustain and live off of this. And that's where I think Sim Expo is so important because it gives grounding to everything else that goes around in the entire sim racing scene.
I mean, my first experience being the on-site commentator was 2022 when we went from Nürburgring in 2021. Obviously, 2020 got cancelled because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
2021, everyone went back to the boulevard, and there was this air of anticipation of what was going to be the next progressive step. The organisers then moved it to Nuremberg. I remember I was worked like a dog that weekend. I was doing every single VT to camera. Luke Crane said I had a pedal fetish because I was going round to ImSim, Venom, every single, where there were pedals like the Pagani pedals that Azatec Sim Sports had at that point. And then we came to Dortmund last year, and I felt a very, very different air. I think firstly because of the fact that people want to have it accessible. So you're right in the middle of the Ruhrgebiet. Within a 3-hour radius, you can reach a span of 22 million people. And this year, the whole being sold out, I think I walked probably the best part of 45 miles that weekend from Wednesday through to Monday, folks. My feet were absolutely sore as anything. My voice was shot, I just done 6 respective either one-off events or championship finales, and you've been just as busy as me. I think you're now closing in on 125 broadcasts so far this year, Jake. I think, if judging by your running commentary on Facebook, I think.
Yeah, so I keep track on my personal Facebook. I keep track on my Twitter. So if you ever want to jump onto me at Jake_Sparey, you'll find my Twitter. You'll find my works that I'm sort of doing out there, sort of as I go. But yeah, um, I decided for the first time to keep track of what I'm doing. I'm sure I've had busier years than yes. I think 2017 might have been my busiest year because I think I was working on a schedule of doing like 5 broadcasts a week for a good 6 months at the time at RaceSpot. But in terms of what I'm looking at tracking my development. I'm looking at tracking my skills and actually taking the time to go, these are the shows that I've done. This is what I like. This is what I don't quite like. And just always having that sort of fettling and fine tuning of what I'm doing to get forward. It's as much of an understanding to go, well, how much am I truly working on this to get to where I want to be? And the answer is once every 3 days at the moment.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think I'm going to stop at 125. I think I'm going to be through at least 140 by the time that the sort of the year's ended. And that doesn't include things like working behind the scenes, for
Mm.
example. So with some of the shows at iRacing, it's not just the fact that you can commentate; it's the fact that they've got a whole broadcast production crew that's there behind the scenes, and they do an absolutely incredible job. So it's things like working the cameras to make sure you got camera 2, camera 3, camera 4, like you would on any given show. It's things like operating the feed, which is there to make sure that the drivers are in. It's making sure that graphics are okay and that you got the music that's fading in absolutely fine. So
Hmm.
there's so much that goes on around this, and quite honestly, I think that this is, you fall in love with it when you. For me, it was when I was 17. It's like, well, what do I do with myself? And
Yeah.
then I stumble across I stumble across a YouTube channel that was going on, and this guy who was in charge of this channel would commentate on himself in the third person. I thought that was really weird, and I was sort of like somehow got a message through on Skype of all things, and was like, right, this is. I think it's a little bit weird that you commentate yourself in the third person. I think I can commentate. No experience. Can I have a go? And somehow I got a yes. We did 4 shows before. Okay, it's too much effort to produce these shows. Bring it down. But I got 4 shows experience under my belt, and that led me to Race Spot because it was the next thing I found. It's like, wow, this is like, okay, I want to do the World Championships. That's the goal I'm going to set myself next.
Mm.
And honestly, every show that I've been on so far, I've been incredibly grateful for. But for me, it's about finding a development, knowing what my strength is, and trying to work to highlight and accentuate my strengths and try and get the best out of everyone else around me as well. I think that's super important.
I think it always comes down to the old adage: you're only as good as your last performance, which
Mm,
is, we do. I think one of the things that I don't like about the job that I do, which you probably understand as well with this, Jake, is that sometimes when you listen to your own voice and you just go, "Did I just really drop that into that commentary?" Like, and it's the funny thing is, I recently did a Mazda MX-5 for UK sim racers, and we had one car rolling, which then flipped another car probably into the nearest stratosphere at Road America, and I made a cheerleading reference. So that it's quite funny how we as Brits can make all these funny quips, and then instantly, as soon as it's someone outside, who doesn't have English as a mother tongue, they go, "What did you mean by that?" And then you have to spend 5 to 10 minutes explaining what you meant. And I go, "Well, look at the footage. Now here's a cheerleading base, and this is what they're trying to do in terms of the routine." And then they go, "Ah, yes, now I understand." Whereas now I have to try and put motorsport vernaculars like in karting, where someone gets away by at least 1.2 seconds by the end of lap one, and I'm like saying, it's just like Sebastian Vettel in his Red Bull days breaking the DRS after the opening lap of the Grand Prix. But yeah, I think it is a case of self development. I always try and find ways in which I think, okay, maybe I can be a little bit more direct, but take my time on pronunciation, enunciation. I mean, especially like say with intros, which is the next question I want to ask, because you do some. Whenever I've worked with you, the intros that you just come up with have this grandeur. It's like a Hollywood trailer without the voice. And how are they actually scripted, or is it just like you just go like, right, or do you just like have bullet points? Because I normally have bullet points in front of me, like saying, okay, where are we, how many drivers we've got, what I go with stats. I go like through the ringer, like say a karting event. I know exactly how many minutes of sessions of qualifying, how many sessions, how many heats, how many finals, total on track time. How do you come up with these wonderful intros? Because whenever I know that you're on the broadcast, and I go, if Jake is leading, I know there's a killer intro coming.
so it's all off the top of my head. I hate the script writing process. It's something that when I first joined GSRC, when Joe, I know he was a former guest on this podcast, when Joe Peak was in control of Global Sim Racing Channel, absolutely everybody had to write down an intro and
Hmm.
do an intro like that. That was not how I was taught. I was taught at Racebot TV through Will Vincent, who is an absolutely incredible commentator and quite honestly does not get the credit he deserves in this business
Yep.
from having absolutely nothing and to a point of him even I think at one point being homeless. He built up Racebot TV. It was the sort of thing he got the rights to the iRacing World Championship before he even had a company set up, and Racebot was set up for the World Championships of iRacing, which I thought was incredible. And the way that he's worked and he's sort of half pushed things over to Hugo Louise to do the day-to-day running, I think is incredible, and they do an amazing job with what they've got. But to go back to the point, the way that Will did it was, right, you've got a show, go. And you're just there like, what do I do? And so it's, how do I go about each race? And I like to think of it like Shakespeare. And it's going to sound very pretentious when I say it, but I like to think of it like Shakespeare. Each and every show that you do has a start, a middle, and an end. Each and every championship that is there has a start, a middle, and an end. Pretty much what you're trying to do at each opening is try and summarize what has happened before, give it some context in the middle, and set it up for the chapter. That's what I think an intro is and what it should be. And each story as a chapter of a book of a championship has to stand alone as its own right as an amazing chapter throughout the entirety of the book. Not every chapter is going to be the best chapter in the world. There has to be a worse chapter. But I think that when I look at openings, I think, right, how can I set up this to be something worth watching? Because the moment that you hook someone in on the intro who is there for the first time, who's watching, the first thing that you got to do is, we're basically salesmen. We got to say, keep watching. This is why.
Yeah.
And so if you can get someone hooked who's never done it before, that's one new person that you've brought in to get the same amount of joy that you have. And that is what I love.
Another person who I have to give a shout out as well, someone who is also a Race Spot alumni, Lewis McGlade, is another fantastic exponent at it. And I mean, it's like with karting, like say the Yami Series Benelux Championship, we were doing reels on social media, and the guy who was doing it, FX, who's a fantastic guy based in France, and he said, "Yeah, maybe we do a voiceover." And I went, "No, this is the final round of the championship. They'll want to see someone talking to camera." And I said, "It will take me 2 tries at most, and like literally 30 seconds." I said, "That's all I need. 30 seconds to set the scene, because people want to know who is the face behind that voice." And the amount of people from the organisation that went, "Right, who had the balls to put that one on the line?" And I went, "It was me." There was no other way. You are not going to do a championship finale where someone is in front of camera, not a driver, not a mechanic, not a parent. It's someone who has been commentating on that season all year long. And it felt special to do that. Like you say, with regards to when we are effectively selling the story of what's been going on. And we had a fantastic X30 senior finale where we did have the 2024 karting edition of Is It Glock. Like literally, the championship leader got punted off going into turn one, dropped all the way down to 29th out of 36 drivers, and had to finish 5th. And I instantly quoted, I said, "It's just like Hamilton versus Massa in 2008 Interlagos for the Formula One driver's title." And as soon as the guy who won the title went past for 5th, I went booloo crazy, because it was just that moment where you're just, you know about this, Jake, as well, where you see this moment and you just go, this is how the story is meant to end. I don't care if it's not a Hollywood script or how it's parlayed out, but it's just where you get that grandiose moment of calling someone across the line and saying that they are champion. It's one of the most fulfilling feelings in the world as a commentator.
It is. I will say I do hope that in 15 years there's no lawsuit around that for you. So I'll just preface that to begin with. So I think that not all championships are created equal. In the sense, you will get runaway championships, and you can't do anything about that. It's your job to document what's going out. This is a story that is written in front of you. Someone might just be dominant, and that's the story of the season, and you're just going to have to sit and look at it. But when it comes together in a way that it just is magic, you just know that there's going to be some electric. You just get the feeling as you go through the opening lap, the first 5 laps, the first 10 laps, however long it is. When you get that feeling, you just rise and you go to your A game because you know that you've got to try and match the action. It's what I've learned as a hot and crazy scale. So for how hot the action is and for how crazy the action is, that's how much energy you've got to throw into the show. And so I'm always on the higher end of hot and crazy, but where I think I am at my best is on last laps. I think that's where I've learned over the last year and a half, 2 years. That's where I'm at my best because I know that I'm a really excitable commentator who has a really loud voice, who can throw it to the heavens. I got
Mm.
in my first 8 weeks of university, I think I got 9 noise complaints during my first 8 weeks. So
Brilliant.
for me, it's like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna have to sit and say I'm the loud one. But when you put a last lap together, FIA Global Esports Championship at Spa comes to mind. 14 drivers within 2 seconds, half a lap to go. You just know it's like, oh my word, we are going to have something amazing. And you got to give it the weight that it deserves as a fantastic race. Um, and where everyone has been trying to, tell me, okay, no, you got to bring it down. You got to give yourself room. For me, it's like, okay, I can give myself room, but I can still hit a level above that. And that's where I have that love. And honestly, when championships go down to that final moment where you just have the biggest smile on your face and you know that something incredible is going to happen, even if it's a dud and nothing happens, it's still incredible. Um, you know, that's what we are in this industry for. We are in this industry for this moment. That moment of this is the craziest thing in the world. This is the most amazing thing in the world. You need to watch this. This is the best thing ever. And just sharing that joy. There is no greater feeling. That's the rush that I wake up and do 125 shows in 10 months, 11 months almost, as we're filming on Halloween. Um,
Yeah, I know,
all of
crazy,
that
right?
to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment on live streams, I think I've been a part of 147 so far, so I'm going to probably top out at 150, 155 by the end of this year. And that's not, folks, not just the sim racing, but it's also the karting as well. Had the
Mm,
opportunity to be involved in so many different championships this year, and I've got another season finale coming up this weekend, as we're recording this. So which is the final round of the Dutch Championship. So I'm going over to Karting Genk again for the umpteenth amount of times that I've been there this year, and I've got another one to go back to there again 4 weeks later for a one-off event, and then I'm off to the Middle East for my last on-site gig of the season. Um,
mm,
but you mentioned about how some drivers from the likes of Redline, from the likes of Coanda, from the likes of Williams are making this a full-time gig, and you mentioned about how prize money has gone up and what we saw with ESLR1 and Rennsport. Of course, RaceSpot had a very, very big. I still remember where, bless him, and I've met Will and I've met Connery, great people. I think Hugo was there as well at the RaceSpot VCO summit at Simply Racing Milton Keynes.
yeah.
And I still remember on the first ever broadcast at Katowice when Will lost his voice, still had the balls to speak and said, "Can someone help me find my voice?" with the cue card in front of him live on
Yeah.
air. We were talking of prize pools at that point where in sim racing we were talking $500,000 US,
Mm,
which was absolutely crazy. And you were seeing um, people and teams pick up. I think it was a top prize for like $60,000 US, which literally can pay you for a year after you take tax and everything else away from it, but gives
mm,
you comfortable living for a year. It's incredible how we're now seeing that sim racing has been captured by has captured the imagination of the Middle East in particular now, especially with Riyadh, with Gamers 8, what was Gamers 8 then became the Esports World Cup. It's really now brought things in terms of sim racing. There's a lot more attention, a lot more focus, and there's these other teams coming in, like obviously Mouse with the likes of Moritz, like Max Benneker, who I remember had his last appearance as a red line driver, the digital GT 500 in Nuremberg in 2022 alongside Gianni
Mm.
Vecchio. That's how, when I remember his last appearance, and I thanked him for being with us at part of the show.
Ma- ma-
Just it's ridiculous now how these companies now coming from the Middle East are now pumping in this amount of money, this amount of production value with the return on investment they are requiring. It's a lot to undertake, isn't it?
There is so much going on in sim racing right now. I could spend hours just talking about it because it's fantastic. The work that's being done with the Esports World Cup and bringing sim racing into the fold is great. I do completely understand why Rennsport is that platform, and jumping in with the ESL is giving them that huge platform and that launch to go forward. I really hope that they build on that and develop it, because they have just stuttered at the moment as a game. So I really hope that they can capture some imagination again, knowing that AC Evo is coming out, and AC Evo I think might just jump into that space that they were hoping to run into. So I really hope that that Rennsport finds its platform and does brilliantly. Um, for me, it's not just the Middle East. It's everywhere that's now starting to jump and realize, okay, hang on a minute. How do we stay cool and how do we stay relevant with our fan base? The most important thing that I think you're finding is these games that we're all seeing and these sim development platforms all have to say, we are building the next generation of racing fan. Because quite simply put, they are.
Mm.
So F1 is doing it through its own game. Absolutely love it. That's absolutely fine. You're looking at NASCAR, IndyCar, which are on iRacing right now, absolutely the right move, everything they should do, and then some. You're looking around and you've got WRC, who are a little bit behind the eight ball on it, but I think their game is going to develop and develop well to a point where they are going to do well with EA, and I think they're going to jump on and have a really nice esports scene out there at the moment. But it's things as well. It's sometimes the less obvious series. Skip Barber, for example, as a series, right?
Mm.
There's three drivers right now who are at VIR at this moment. So you got Victor Miranda, who's an amazing Brazilian driver. It was going to be Matt Caruana, but Matt Caruana had a clash with something, so he couldn't go. So you got Matt Busa, who's been in sim racing for like a decade and a half, has done everything that you can do on the iRacing side, both road and on oval. And you got Ivan Machado. One of those three drivers might do what Elvis Ranking did in 2021, what Sebastian Weldon did in 2022, and that is to go on, be a part of the Skip Barber Sim Racing World Championship, get a top three, book your place to get a ride in the championship, and then go on to win the championship. So you're looking at what that next generation is and what that feels like. This is way bigger than just a gaming sphere where people can be gamers and can be incredible, right?
Mm.
Because you're looking at Max Verstappen, who's up at 3 o'clock in the morning sim racing before his races. And it doesn't just have to be out there and, Formula style racing. You got Lando Norris, who did that and then decided, I want to step back from that. You got people like Max Esterson, who's coming up, who's doing a really fantastic job. Used to be one of the most amazingly quick sim race that you went, oh my word, this guy is fast. You know, everybody's jumping on. There was a time where Igor Fraga got himself a seat in F3. Chembol Bashi was another one who did well. Lauren Heinrich
Yeah.
was absolutely fantastic over the sim racing sphere. Everywhere you look, sim racing is having a massive influence. And I haven't even talked about William Byron, who is possibly the biggest success story that's come out of sim racing to go on to pretty much be the guy of guys out there in NASCAR. So when you sit down and you look at it on paper, sim racing is this incredible tool for not only people to develop and not just develop in the sense of you're a driver and you can go on, you can get race experience any weather, any day, any time, any set of drivers. And it's not just down to driving, it's even to the point where teams will now test their liveries out in games to see if they work on the track and do that. It's incredible.
Yeah, also another scheme, Racing Prodigy, where someone who you've
Yes.
worked alongside, Arjuna Kankapati,
Mm,
is a big part of. At this point, as we're recording it, 15 days to go until 30 sim racers head to NOLA Motorsports Park. And it's, you've got like Williams Esports, you've got all these. I think Racing Prodigy, has been one of the biggest, along with Skip Barber, the biggest programs stateside that have gone,
mm,
right, we're going to give these drivers a chance. We want them to prove themselves in qualifying rounds. I think they've also got an MX5 championship underway at the moment with the likes of an Anglo Maltese driver who I know, Ryan McAuliffe. He's currently in the top 36 in that one at the moment. But seeing,
mm,
again, it's very much an Americanized Gran Turismo GT Academy, but
mm.
based stateside, which is really really exciting. I'm loving the fact that we are seeing these esports teams, and also these organisations that have said, yeah, we see the value of sim racing. You look at Suelio Almeida, who's become a radical champion. He's going to the Radical World Finals next week to the Middle East to compete against the best in the world. And this is a guy who brought out, I think, one of the best books on how to be a sim racer, which he launched at the expo, and I had the fortune of getting a copy directly off him. It just goes to show that people are saying, yes, karting is a pathway. And I get asked the question so much now, what do you see as the ultimate pathway for motorsport? And I said, it is down to preference. But the
Mm.
way things are going, sim racing, in terms of accessibility, in terms of price point, in terms of availability of components for PCs, they're a hell of a lot cheaper than going out and getting yourself a cart, having to go out there physically, travel all over the place. Where I've known drivers having whose parents have spent the best part of over £100,000 a year in a top flight karting team. It's
Mm.
big money. But now we're seeing that line that was blurred to the point of nothingness during COVID-19, Jake. We are now
Yeah.
seeing everything coming out the other side, and now 4 years past the pandemic, sim racing is now saying, yes, we accept karting, but we want to provide our own path.
I think the most amazing thing, and I am the biggest sports buff ever. Any sport I love. I'd love to commentate any sport I can get my hands on. I During that time through COVID, the one most interesting voice I heard about all of this was Pat McAfee, who, after listening and watching NASCAR on iRacing, went, I would absolutely love it if they just forwent the tracks completely and just went pure sim. And you'd have that wonderful take of all these drives in the world. I know I'm paraphrasing to beyond and back, but it was along the lines of, okay, you know, I can see why you have to have real world racing because of the fans and all the rest of that. But from a pure standpoint, you could just do the sim. And it would be so amazing and incredible and groundbreaking to do that. And there is a world where sim racing is absolutely fantastic in what it does. I think that on its transfer to the real world and being its pathway, I still believe that karting is the best way forward for people right now to get into the industry. I don't think that has changed in a very long time. I think we're about 10 years away from sim racing being the number one preference of trying to work out who is the fastest way to get in and who is the best. And it won't matter about price point as much. It won't matter as much about how much sponsors you bring in because you've got the talent pool. And it's just simply, unrecognizable from 10 years to now how much these sim races have changed and developed. I look at the amount of practice that they did. Mac Backham, for the Porsche Esports Super Cup,
Mhm.
I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, put something like a week's worth of practice. He put 115 hours in to the Nürburgring Nordschleife for a week, like properly put it in, 6 laps, and I think he was out like lap 2 because he got caught up in something that he really shouldn't have got caught up into. But the amount of hours, time, and dedication that these drivers are putting in might as well be a full-time career. Might as well be going to try and be the next Andrea Kimi Antonelli, to be the next Max Verstappen, to be, the next Colapinto, for example, and try and be that next, big thing. It will happen. There will be success stories that come from it. But I think the greatest thing that I have ever heard in terms of looking at what I'm doing comes from, believe it or not, an anime called Monogatari. So back in Monogatari, and it's a line by one of the villains, and it's when you compare the real and the fake is of far greater value because in its deliberate attempt to be real, it is far more real than the real thing itself. And that is sim racing in a nutshell. Everyone is trying to become a racer at heart. Everyone thinks they can. And in their attempts to be real, they are much better drivers sometimes than the drivers themselves because they have to be absolutely faultless, race in, race out, day in, day out. And that's why you've got guys, for example, who have 12,000 I rating. You go, how?
Yeah, you look at it and you just go, how on earth have you gotten there? But then we see the transfer of a lot of IRL drivers. Let's take one big example: Daniel Murad runs his own sim
Mm,
racing team, Muradness. Is an ambassador for advanced sim racing, and congratulations to him and his wife for recently welcoming a new addition, who I'm sure will be behind a sim rig wheel before you know it, probably at the age of
mm,
3. Another proponent of sim racing over in the US and North America in general. We've got other people such as Romain Grosjean who set up his own racing team, R8G Esports, which
mm,
had a lot of success with quite a few of the Hungarian crew that I remember commentating on in other R Factor 2 championships. And you see
mm,
now that a lot of. I still remember Robert Wickens after his unfortunate incident that meant he became a paraplegic, and him being in the Marla car and his force feedback being set to 100% in the Marla car and having to pit after 2 laps. Okay, folks, and this is a guy who's been through the ringer. I still remember
mm,
interviewing him when he was back with Mercedes Benz in DTM in 2016, back at the Lausitz ring where he actually was leading the championship at that point. And I think he was partnered with the likes of Jimmy Broadbent, and he just like went, guys, I don't know what's going on. My force feedback has failed. I'm at 100%. And they were like, oh, right, okay, Rob, you better bring it in. You're seeing a lot more of these drivers now. I still remember Simon Pagenaud having a. If anyone might remember, Simon Pagenaud's legendary sim chair swap, where he had another steering wheel, another direct drive, set of pedals, and he just plugged it in, took the other one away. It was like a 30-second pit stop, and he did. And they actually had the zoom camera on him at the time. I remember that
mm.
because I remember the commentators at that point. I think one of them was good buddy Chris McCarthy, and they could not believe how quickly Simon Pagenaud had gotten himself out of a situation where everything had failed. He plugged a new one in, had it on standby. That just goes to show that sim racing can be a little bit better than IRL, can't it, Jake, in terms of hilarious moments, let's say.
Oh, it can. And I think there are some incredible bits of joy you can have because, you know, essentially you can have full rig swaps, which you see with Simon Pagenaud. You can also have so much amazing in-race action. I run a series every 3 months or so called Max Bant,
Mm.
and the entire premise of it is, well, what's the worst kind of racing that we can put? How much can we break sim racing? It got so bad to the point that we literally changed the way that slowdown penalties work at Le Mans in iRacing because of the way that everybody was cutting the corners over the chicanes, not getting the slowdowns for it. Everyone just, that got changed. They went through. You know, it's things like, for example, having a spinny wheel decide, who wins this race. It's things like having one instant point to try and run through, and whoever goes off is, in trouble and out. It's things like I can't even spoil the one that I want to do next, which is amazing. Um, but we've just had like 25. I need to go look this up now.
I'm
I think we've
actually
had
looking at the
20.
playlist with the titles. The titles, folks, are magical. It's Max Bantz 2 Sim Racing Boogaloo. Then we had Max Bantz 3 Revenge of the Yeet. Max Bantz 5 4 A New Meme. Then we had The Incident Point Strike Back. Return of the 4X. The Netcode Awakens. The Last Man Standing. The Rise of Democracy. And then I think one of my favourite ones was anything you can bounce, I can bounce it better. But then the best one, I think, in my honest opinion here, Jake, was Max Bantz 14, the Archbishop of Banterbury. That's how much you can bring a film title into a sim racing context just by one word.
Absolutely. I think that you can, every time that we're going through this and we hit every 3 months and right, we've got to do this again and we've got to find a way to go forward with it. It's what reference can we find? What are we doing? For example, Bantz 20 was at Oschersleben, so you have to call it John Cullen's Emerald because, we used the same layout and it was incredible. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that was a race that was won. It was a case of first to the line would basically win, and then the last one would always get eliminated. But it was an anything goes, and so we had this anything goes of everyone trying to get through. And I remember it was Adam Weller and Daniel Yeaman on commentary, and just the joy in Dan Yeaman's voice when Dan Stevens, who ended up winning the event, went out of the hairpin left-hander turn 4 out on track. And instead of doing the entire top half of Oschersleben, just went through the guardrails back out to the other side of the circuit
Oh,
and
brilliant.
just went on. It was chef's kiss.
Oh, you know what? If you want me to jump on board with comms for any of these Max Bantz things in the off season, I am definitely game for it, buddy. I'm because I did watch a couple of the broadcasts, and there were just times when when you get those really really deep laughs in the pit of your stomach, and you just cannot stop, and then your rib cage muscles, they start hurting. I got one of them, and I like literally just I just had to sort of try and control myself a little bit. So there are funny bits to commentary. There are also those serious bits as well. Um, but Jake, obviously, having started your career 10 years ago, you made a return to Race Spot. Let's not forget, after quite a few years away, a 5-year hiatus, and back in September you came back to the team at Race Spot. It must have felt like you were definitely back home, wasn't it?
The thing that I think was really important about me leaving Race Spot in the first place was basically growing up as a commentator. Um, Will very much it felt very father sonish, sort of
Mm.
being there the first time that I was there, and so I learned a lot out of Will. And I think I was at that point where I was ready to step out of his shadow and say, right, I want to take some responsibility. I want to push myself up to the front as much as I can. But I don't think I went about it the right way when I was there the first time. And I hold my hands up to it and say, I'm a human. I make mistakes. So I don't think I handled myself the best way the first time round.
Mm.
And I honestly believe that going away for 5 years, learning exactly what it is about my craft that I need to do, getting the opportunities earned instead of handed, I think really gave me a great insight into, okay, this is how much I need to step up my game. Because from where I was 5 years ago to where I am now is night and day. And I
Mm.
still think I was pretty good back then, but now I feel like I'm really hitting a stride. Um, so for me, coming back, the understanding of what it's there is completely different. It's a different structure. There's different people working on the projects. There's an abundance of talent which sits there. And I look week to week, and I'm lucky to get a gig at this moment in time. There's so much amazing talent that is all there and sorted and situated. And I know I'm coming on late in the season with them, and just trying to get my hands on anything that I can with them.
Mhm.
But there's such an intelligent and fantastic group of guys who are there and producing such amazing sim racing. And I think it goes to show you that when you've got talent and all those guys like Arjuna and Daniel and George Morgan was there once upon a time, and you can keep going down the list on people. I think Ewan as well. I think is incredible. Ewan O'Leary is an
Yes.
incredible commentator out there at the moment. I think that when you've got those sorts of guys and you've got five guys who can absolutely lead a broadcast 100% and can be considered, absolutely fantastic. You are going to have to fight for space to try and get any sort of form in. And, I think that they've got the best problem in the world is that they've got so many amazing talents out there that they've got to just schedule them in and fit them all in. Um, I love what RaceSpot has done over the last 5 years. I had this wonderful chat with a friend of mine at Sim Expo. It was a drunken chat for him. It was a sober chat for me. A guy
Mm.
called Philip Schallenberg, who runs or at the time was running a sim rig company in Switzerland. Um, and it was this chat which basically in 2018 would be what VCO is today. It was, this is what sim racing needs, and it's just this chat of we're just spitballing, and basically what VCO became through Florian Hasper and the work that's done at Borisud competition basically became this incredible um bit of racing content and talent out there. And VCO has gone from strength to strength now and has become basically integral for the iRacing special event, and actually an integral part of now the IMSA championship that will be running from next month onwards for the 4 races that's coming along with that. So I think that from what I've learned from 5 years ago to now is that I'm putting in the effort. I'm trying to take every show one show at a time and seeing where it takes me. And it's about understanding that, you know, I'm just a spoke on the wheel. The wheel's going to keep turning with or
Mm.
without me. And so, you're on it for the ride. Make sure you stay on as long as you can.
I think also when there's a pivotal moment, and we're going to go back to what we discussed at this point about a month ago when Jake told me about a very exciting development. And so I'm going to quote Jake verbatim as he posted at midday on the 9th of October. Story time. So, about 6 years ago, my father was a conservatory salesman and was tasked with the job of selling a conservatory to Max Chilton. During that period, this message found its way back to me, and I've been doing what I can to make this message a reality. Tomorrow, I make my first commentary appearance on the IndyCar Butt Kicker iRacing Pro Series, and I can say this is one of the closest shows I'm getting to making this a reality. And I'm actually going to read what Max wrote on the card, which was when he was still with Carlin, an IndyCar, running number 59, saying to Jake, keep up the great commentary and hopefully you commentate on one of my races one day. And then the next thing you know, Jake is commentating on, I think it was round 4, Barber Motorsports Park, an iconic track in its own right. And I remember, and I said to Jake, I said, I will try and tune in. And I did, and I was just like thinking, that's what it means as one commentator to another to have the respect to say, I will try and watch. And I did, and it was like early o'clock in the morning for us here in the UK, but I think it was 8 p.m. Eastern when the broadcast started. When you'd been told that you were lined up for that gig and you got the confirmation, what was your first thought that ran through your head? Not came out of your mouth, but ran through your head at that point, like saying, "Oh my God, really?"
So I was hoping for the whole series.
Mm.
There's a lot of context behind it. So before IndyCar, iRacing had their own version of the IndyCar called the IRO1.
Hmm.
Absolute monster of a car if you ever drive it in sim. It sounds like an early 2000s Formula 1 car. It drives like nothing else on the sim, and it is frightening. So I'd had the open wheel championship of that in 2021 and 2023 in its various guises. Absolutely loved calling that series, throwing everything I could at the board, and going, this is incredible. This is what I want to do. I am finding my feet. This is my skill set. I want to do Formula. Formula is what I want to do for my career. So coming around to 2024, believe it or not, I've done 125 shows, but the first 100 shows, I hadn't done a single iRacing show on commentary. And there's so much amazing talent because if you think of each company's got amazing sim racing talent, right? So RaceBot's got talent, Apex has got talent, GSRC's got amazing talent, SimSpeed's got talent. You go through the works, everyone's got amazing talent, right? How do you fit them all in? I hadn't had a show. I was hoping that I was going to be on FIA full time, and I was going to hope I was going to be on IndyCar full time. One of the two I was hoping for. I end up with neither. And I just sort of went, Drew, I need to talk to you, Drew Adamson. And I went, Drew, I need to talk to you. I'm trying to make this my career. I've had this show for the last 2 years. I just want a bit of understanding of why I'm not quite there and how I need to get to that next level to be selected. And I think he just looked at it, realized, and went, right, okay. We'll have a look at what came through, what comes up through for the next few shows. There's a few things that we can have lined up for you. Obviously, we've got to balance it with everyone else that's trying to, put their seats in. But we'll see what we can do. Um, the biggest key, I think, to me getting those opportunities, and it's the worst way to do it, is that most of my commentators who are, or most of the commentators who are there, work in Florida. There were a couple hurricanes this year, and with people being moved, like Evan Pasoko, for example, having to like completely up sticks and go for a week and then come back. That's what got me in for a show on FIA. Because Kenneth Bueno is out in sort of the Tampa region. It's a case of we don't know whether your power's going to work or not.
Hmm.
So we're going to run this booth as a 3 because simply put, we don't want to take things as a second chance. I was eternally grateful for the opportunity to take a piece of motivation 6 years ago and run with it and try and gain as much traction as I could with it. It is something that I am always going to treasure, making that opportunity, at least in a sim sense, come true. Um,
Hmm.
and for me, my first thought was, yes, finally I can stamp this goal down of what I was trying to do and what I've been trying to do, this long winding path journey that I've been on, and say, yes, this is now going to be a stamp moment, and
Hmm.
it's now from here. How do you kick on? So for me, it's a huge smile, and a lot of it is a responsibility to myself lifted off my shoulders. The smallest caveat I'll put to the end of this story, um, is Max Chilton's channel, his X account, had been unactive for I think about a year at this point. I think it was either 3 or 4 days ago. He quote tweeted something, and there's a like from Max there. So I'm really happy that he got to see that and he's happy with it.
I mean, as I normally say, folks. These conversations on Commentators Corner are not to trip people up. It is just basically it is a conversation. It is not scripted. It is not planned. Well, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. You
Yeah,
know, it's more a case of finding about the people. And I still remember when we did our first World Pro Racing broadcast.
Mm,
With Justin and Adrian Figalo. Adrian, I keep in regular contact with, and obviously with the Pretty Cares event that Justin has decided to put himself through the ringer on, doing
mm,
multiple 24-hour races on his own. And I remember commentating alongside Edwin. He was in the studios at World Pro Racing, and I was in my hotel room in Eastern Germany, running on my 5G hotspot, just making sure. And they said, "Do I need to be?" And I went, I don't look great because I've just been in the booth for the whole day. Can I not be on camera? That's fine. Like that's what Adrian said to me. He said it's not a problem. And I always thought I I, I thought there's going to be opportunities for someone like Jake out there, and there will be there will continue to be. But as you said, Jake, there are so many good commentators out there. I mean, I think one of the things that when I got my break into sim racing, which was through the Team Brit Summer Series, through Mike Yao and through Darren Cook,
mm,
who said to me at that point, give Dave Player, the then founder and boss, a shout, and I just said, look, I'll do it for a Team Brit T-shirt. I was twiddling my thumbs. I was going out for an hour and a half walks at night time because that was when no bugger was about, and I knew that I could get in 3 to 4 miles. I think I lost about 20, 25, 30 pounds over the
mm.
course of that period of lockdown. Unfortunately, put it on and a little bit more since then. But I am starting to get back to that mentality. That there is so much great talent. I mean, as I said, I've met Connery, I've met Will. I had a really good chat with Will when we were outside, just talking about things in general, just talking about life in general, and the way that he conducts himself. He's a great character, and it's great that there are people like him that RaceSpot.tv has always been. It's when someone said to me, "Check this out," they are bringing some kick-ass content in terms of sim racing. You'll learn a lot from it, and for the first 3 months after starting doing what was an Assetto Corsa Competizione series, I then find myself getting interested about iRacing and other forms of sim racing itself. And it was just like, I didn't care if it was 3 in the morning. I was on furlough at the time. So I
Mm.
wasn't having to worry about whether my body clock was going to be screwed. I could go like, right, okay, 8 p.m. Eastern. That's 2 in the morning. Yeah, I'll still be awake for that one. But like you say, there is so much great talent where we have like Lewis McGlade, we have Arjuna, we have you, and you know people like yourself and myself. We're very well regarded within sim racing in our own respects. I mean, I've had people. What I didn't, because obviously with the Simi Awards that VCO have done for the past few years,
Yeah.
um, it was quite funny when people like saying, "So why haven't you been nominated for it?" And I said, "Well, I've been nominated by the public, but it's not always down to the public." And I think it's always nice when you get these people that say, "Thanks for the kind words on the stream. Really appreciate the work you do." It's quite a nice thing because it keeps us grounded on terra firma with both feet. And people say, I think coming back to what you said, you're just a cog in the wheel. You're like a cog in the gearbox. We're there to tell the story. We're there to help. And whatever positive feedback we get and comments we get, always we take to heart because we know that we've done our job right at the end of the day.
Well, you're above me because I've never been nominated for a Simi.
They put me in as a vote, but I've never been nominated. I've never been on the final role. But I mean, it's just if I'm honest, I don't think it takes awards for people to be recognised as talent. I
No.
think it's you people out there, the audience that watch or listen to Commentators Corner or watch or listen to sim racing streams, IRL streams. It's just like everyone has their favourites, don't they?
Yeah. And it goes down to, I think, quite strongly, where are you commentating and how big your audience is. I think that when you've got these massive LAN events and you've got some incredible talent up there, like for example ESLR1, where you've got George Morgan and Lewis McGlade. You've also got George Morgan on PSGL, which is the biggest F1 esports league out there in the world. He's worked very well with Gareth Allen to make EA Creator Series, which is with Alex Gillen and Tiamat Marduk and
Hmm.
all of the fantastic creators who are in and around that. He's got an absolutely fantastic platform. George is a wonderful guy to talk to.
Yep.
I could honestly talk to him for hours and hours. I wish I had enough time to sort of run into him more. And get a real understanding of just how good he is as a commentator. I think that personality comes through, and having a platform to show that is simply incredible. George Morgan, I think, is the hardest working commentator in sim racing at the moment on his social game, and I do not think there is anyone that can match him at the moment in terms of
Hmm.
that. What he does is insane. And I think that he is someone who is truly, truly going to make it because he's had to go through all of that before. I think he had his own band once upon a time,
Yep.
and he was working through and he was doing all of the UK scene. And honestly, I think George Morgan is perfectly set up to be a fantastic commentator, and he will go and get everything that he deserves in life, which is, you know, give him the keys to the house and he'll probably run it absolutely wonderfully. Um,
Hmm.
but to go back to a point, I think that in terms of commentary development over the course of 10 years, um, I've really loved being able to find that strength, go with that strength, and just have that ability to say, right, this is what I believe my philosophy of commentary is. And honestly, what doesn't, I don't think doesn't get talked about enough is what are the influences? What are you watching? What are you listening to? Who are you taking from to try and get to that point?
Hmm.
And I love that idea of taking from as many places as you can
Yep.
and taking as many philosophies as you can from it. So I'll probably say the three biggest takeaways that I've got is Keith Hewen, who is legendary MotoGP commentator, absolute godsend on the mic. For me, I like to commentate in the sense of it is emotion. You are supposed to be the person that you are sat next to on the sofa trying to help people through. When you've got no commentary and you're watching any sport at all, it's boring. Like that, some people enjoy it, and it's like, well, you like watching paint dry, but it's generally boring.
Hmm.
Keith Ewan is the sort of person who lights up any show that he's on and has that wealth of knowledge and experience that you go and look at and go, just listen to what he did on the call between Rossi and Marquez and Sepang.
Oh God,
You know,
yes.
like that is pure theater. Rossi hung him out. Rossi hung him out. And you just feel that emotion of, oh my word, what did I just watch? And Keith Hewen is a master of that. And so I try and imbue as much of that. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. It doesn't matter who it is. Not everyone can play the hero. Someone's got to play the villain. And that's where I think he really does well. Out of left field, my number two pick is Jim Ross. So WWE,
Boomer Sooner. Yep. There we
AEW.
go.
So Jim Ross makes me believe that in a world of professional wrestling entertainment, what you are watching is real.
Yep.
And while sim racing in itself is real and the action is real, you get the understanding of you need to sell this action. You need to make sure that you are doing what you can to put everything together on the board and say this is the best thing. You know,
Mhm.
I will admit to say I have said that a few moves have been bowling shoe ugly in the past. You take from him and say it's just some wonderful, wonderful words and lines that he comes up with that is simply put unparalleled. But I think Jim Ross is a master of what he's done. And I think nobody can capture the imagination of an audience like he can and he's done. To an element, Michael Cole can, but he's had 15 years where he couldn't really do that. And so it's not quite as there as it should be, but Jim Ross is like a one of one in sort of the world of commentary and that. And probably the final person that I put in that list is Kevin Harlan. Um, Amazing commentator in all of America's sports. It is a travesty that he only calls Super Bowls for NFL radio, I think it is, or the NFL Network. It is a travesty that he is not more mainstream than what he is, because what he does as an art form, I think it was a college basketball game. Um, and just the sheer amount of control he had over the two people he was working with. He just threw his arms back like that when the basket was made. There was about 10 seconds worth of silence, and then he brought everybody back in. And the way that he controls a broadcast from start to finish, it's artistry. The way he works on the fly is simply incredible. One of the most memed about lines is, "I'm calling both games. I'm confused about what game you're calling. I'm calling both games because it's the playoff, one team, two teams in, two teams out through two games." And basically he calls it like it's NFL Red Zone. And honestly, Kevin Harlan is the best think on your feet style commentator, and you need to be adaptive when you're behind this microphone, because anything can happen. And Kevin Harlan, I think, is someone that every commentator in the world can take 1,000 things from.
You know what? That's really, really cool hearing. I mean, because we've had two WWE references in this show. Pat McAfee, who has taken a hiatus from Friday Night SmackDown, and he has one hell of a talk show. I still remember when Brock Lesnar did his best Stone Cold Steve Austin impersonation live on the Pat McAfee show. It's great because it just goes to show that commentary is iconic no matter what sport it's in. Okay, yes, this has got predominantly motorsport sim racing, but there is hopefully plans that I might be able to get in contact with some other people from other sports to give their viewpoint here on Commentator's Corner. Jake, thank you so much for your time, buddy. Keep racking up those numbers for this year, and thank you very much for joining me.
I appreciate it, Alex. And you sit down and you take an opportunity and you look at everything that you're doing as well. Um, Quite honestly, I look at the work you do and you are a trooper. And quite honestly, when you sit down and you think, from where we sort of sat and started with World Pro Racing, where we first knew each other, and I knew nothing about you and you knew nothing about me,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of from what you've been able to do, what I've been able to do, and sort of how our paths are just sort of like that at the moment. And sometimes we'll have a little bit of a cross section and interjecture between each other. You are killing it as well, mate. And honestly, you're doing so much more than I am at the moment. And you're on such a wonderful level. And I just want to see you continue. And honestly, it is a privilege to be on this podcast here with you. And I look forward to seeing many more amazing guests along with you.
Indeed, so big thank you to Jake for jumping on board here for episode 64 of Commentator's Corner. Of course, if you are watching on the YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you're watching on Apple Music or Spotify, please don't forget to check out every single episode that is already up. We've got more exciting guests to come up. I've got a very, very special guest from the world of sim racing lined up for episode 65. So watch this space. See you all again soon. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye.